Meanwhile, on the comic box. Comics. Hey everyone, welcome to The Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. I'm Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek, and I am joined this week for the entire episode with somebody that I could have sworn was already on the show, but no, because I was just over on his show. It is Void from the Geek to Geek podcast. Hey Void.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. This is the first time on this feed for me. Like you said, last time we talked about comics and the comic box, we were on the other feed.
Yeah. So, very quick introduction so everyone has a frame of reference for you then. As we know, you're the host of the Comic Box podcast, co-host, co-creator.
I'm not. That's actually your podcast?
What? I said Comic Box. So you're the co-host, co-creator. Well, to be fair, I mean, if I wanted to be nice, we could call you the co-creator of the Comic Box, though. Because to be fair, I came to you, and you helped me figure out that initial format. But yes, so the Geek to Geek podcast, and then you also host Video Game News Now.
Yes, which is on hiatus at the moment. But yeah, the Geek to Geek podcast is every week with Beej, and that one's great. We love doing that, and it's awesome that you've been on a couple times. We want to have you back for more things, especially related to the MCU later. But yeah, so where I'm coming from in general, I play a lot of video games. It's probably my main hobby, outside of work and spending time with my family. When I do get free time, it's mostly gaming, and then, I do all the typical things like TV, movies. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of writing. I have my own blog that has been kind of consistent for roughly 6 years off and on. And then I do stuff like running, and I read comic books, but I probably don't read them as much as most of your listeners. You actually got me into comics when we were in college, and I hadn't really read them except for maybe, the odd like gas station stop on a road trip when I was a kid. Beyond that, I hadn't really read comics until we were living together in college, and you gave me a bunch of them. So like The Walking Dead and Why the Last Man is what kind of hooked me into modern comics. And then I got busy with life, graduated college, got married, had kids. And then in the last year or two, I came back around to checking out the services that they have now. So like Comixology and Marvel Unlimited.
Yep.
And now I'm at the point where I will go and I'll grab like a month subscription to Marvel Unlimited, maybe every 6 months, and I'll just pound through comics for like 2 weeks straight and catch up on everything I'm interested in, try out some new ones, kind of feel satisfied with it, and then I'll put it down for another 6 months, and then I'll come back around to it.
Which is kind of a good way to do it, because you don't get new with the subscription ones. A lot of the stuff you get isn't brand new. They want you to pay for those individual digital titles.
Yeah. And, I do use Comixology still. They had a couple years in a row where free comic book day, they would give out like 100 issue number one type things. So I have like all of those that I tried. And then the only comics that I have actual subscriptions for where I get every issue right when it comes out are through Comixology. So I get Rat Queens and I get Wayward. And those are kind of my two favorites right now.
Good. And was it me that turned you on to Rat Queens? Because that's one of my favorites. I feel like it might have been.
No? We talked about it. I don't know if I told you about it, but I found that one from someone else, I want to say. Or maybe on my own. I don't know. It's a good comic, though. People should read it.
Yeah, they definitely should. It's usually top of my list. And I know Liam, who's been on the show, I've made him read it. And yeah, my other friends, it's one of the ones that I always try and push on him just because it's so interesting. That'd be really weird if it was, because I could have sworn I found it on my own online because I was reading reviews of how it was very different and that sort of thing.
Maybe. I've gotten a lot of my recommendations from you, and I might have just lost track in my mind. You very well could have recommended that one.
Well, in any case, yeah, so we were roommates back in college. I'm happy to have introduced you to sort of modern comics. And I like that it was some of those long form ones, which kind of gets me thinking. There might be a couple other ones I might throw your way. And some of them have been suggestions on here I think you would dig too. Like you'd probably dig Lazarus. It's just some of the ones that have sort of a longer form narrative rather than a month-to-month superhero book.
Yeah, and I like the ones that tell a story and then they know when to end or wrap up that story arc. I don't like the ones that drag on and on and on. So some of the other ones you mentioned in, I don't know, the last couple episodes where you were talking about like Elseworlds or like other type stories, where there's just a few issues, but they really like change the premise of a hero. Yeah. Those sounded really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, Elseworlds are great. They were always my favorite because you got the trade. This is back before I really started getting into buying trades. I was still very much single issues, but you would get Elseworlds and trades because it's one and done. Here's the entire story. It never made sense to me to go out and buy, and I still don't. I don't really go out and buy trades of long-running series because you're reading that usually as it's going, and it's like, I don't want 800 trades for this story because it's been out forever. I think the one I have the most of is I have all of the trades for a book called Transmetropolitan, and that's 10 volumes of trades, and that to me was like kind of crazy that it was so many, even though that's a very good run, but it's not to the length of, say, The Walking Dead that's now up to 157 or whatever it is. So good. So introduction, was there anything else before I start rolling? As far as what people need to know about you?
If anything from the news is interesting, I'll chime in. But I'm mostly here because the main topic I'm very interested in. Do people know what the main topic is, or are you keeping that for later?
Well, I talked about it last week. No, I kind of changed up the way I do the format. I used to do these little headline bit things and then lead into the show. But I'm trying out something different. But no, totally. Like we're going to be talking about the Netflix, specifically Luke Cage. This week, as a primer, I'm going to sort of go over the history of Luke Cage, and for those that maybe haven't seen Jessica Jones, which if you haven't, go see that first. I mean, come on. But sort of what's happened in that show. Some of it's kind of spoilery, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about sort of how he exists in the comic books, and then how that's possibly going to translate into the show.
Yeah, and like I love the MCU, and I really like the little corner of it that Netflix has right now. I've watched all of the Netflix shows, and I'm super excited for Luke Cage, but I don't know that much about him, which is why I'm here. Like I'm playing the part of the audience, like teach me. I want to learn.
Well, perfect. Before we get into that stuff, first thing, I don't know what I'm going to call this yet, but I wanted to just carve out a little block in front where I just kind of talk about the other geeky stuff that I've been doing that doesn't necessarily relate to comic books. And I don't know, like, I don't want to steal your whole weekly geekery segment.
Do it. You should. Call it whatever you want, right. But it's wonderful. It's
because
great
it's also
to have
at the back end of your show versus the front of mine. But
it's nice to just have a space to talk about whatever, though.
Yeah. And I know that's one of the nice things about the Geek to Geek podcast is you kind of cover whatever the topic is that week, and you're not really hampered down by news and that sort of stuff. Where as much as I love doing it, that's really half the point of the show, is it is kind of nice just to have a thing for me to be like, hey, so for example, for this week, Walking Dead Season 6 came out on Netflix, and I haven't seen any of this last season, so I've been digging into that, and I've really been enjoying it. I think I'm on episode 7 now of Season 6. The first couple episodes in particular were really good, and I keep forgetting how much The Walking Dead can hook me as a television show, how they have just those really powerful moments of like, this is what you do in a post-apocalyptic world, and your character really stands out, and just have those really strong character moments. I will say there was, I don't know if it's episode 5 maybe, where it feels like every other time somebody speaks, it's a soliloquy. It's like after this town gets attacked and everybody needs to stop and be like, this is the moment when we do things, or like things just aren't going to be the same anymore. And you're like, you don't all need to make speeches. It's like the last season of Buffy on television, where every time somebody spoke, they had to make a speech. So, but in general, love The Walking Dead. And it's one of those things where I didn't realize how much I missed it until I started seeing it again. But beyond that, I'm going to the Minnesota Renaissance Festival this weekend. I'm looking forward to that. Do you go? Do you go to RenFest?
I've gone some years. I haven't gone in the last few just because my kids are young and it's hard to make time to get out and about when you have young kids. But yeah, it's cool when you can go. It's very interesting.
And I'm that guy. I go in costume. I think my most consistent, if you call it a cosplay, is when I dress up to go to the Renaissance Festival. So
I saw you in some Hobbit gear the other day. You posted some pictures.
Yes, it was also Hobbit week this last week. In addition to, it was Batman Day last weekend, and then it was Talk Like a Pirate Day on Tuesday, and I didn't dress up for that at all. But then on Thursday, I wore like half my Hobbit gear. I posted on Twitter. I called it it was like business casual Hobbit.
Yeah, it was something like that.
It's part of my Frodo costume. I didn't wear the wig, I didn't wear the cape, but I wore just the button-down shirt, the vest, and the ring, and then I didn't wear like the little the short pants or whatever you want to call them, flood pants. But yes, so I did that this past week. And then as far as Netflix goes, I have officially started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm only like 3 episodes in. It's okay. It's definitely not like Walking Dead. I just got to see the next episode. I'm not getting that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's just the way it goes with network shows versus shows on cable, I think sometimes.
Oh, man, it really does. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know it's a show that I can binge, but I'm going to try and work through it. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to getting to some Halloween stuff. I mentioned that a little bit further on down the show. When I used to live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa for a couple of years, and I worked at a haunt there. I'm a huge haunted house guy. Growing up in high school and college, I had my own haunted house for like 8 years with some guy named Matt, actually, who's been on the show. We ran a haunted house together. So I worked at this haunt, and then that was indoors where they had a rented like warehouse they turned into an indoor haunt. And now they've built this massive, what they call a scream park, basically, where there's 3 separate haunts on this big property at I think it's the Lynn County Fairgrounds or something down there. So I think I'm going to be heading down there next week. It's their grand opening weekend, first weekend in October, last weekend in September, and go haunt. I'm super looking forward to that. But Cedar Rapids is kind of in crisis mode right now because with all of the rainfall that we've been getting, because you're different part of the cities, did you get hit really hard with all that rain?
Yeah. Parts of the city that I'm in, the suburb I'm in, got a ton of flooding. We're not like the area that my house is in. We're not in a low-lying area, but there are other parts of the suburb that just got hammered and flooded. And yeah, the whole Twin Cities and like the greater area and stuff for sure.
So I was getting some of that. Plus, everything flows downriver, and so they're looking at some severe flooding, and like Cedar Rapids, Iowa was underwater in 2008. Like there's a mark on the buildings several feet above your head where they have it marked off of where the water got to at one point, where it crested the river. Completely decimated downtown and this whole other sort of flood area of town that has really yet to be rebuilt. They're like starting to do that now, so many years later, and it looks like it's going to get hit again. Not as bad as last time, several feet below that, but it certainly seems like some businesses are probably going to get flooded. Everybody's sandbagging and stuff right now. If I have friends from Cedar Rapids that are listening, please stay safe. Please be smart. Don't drive down flooded roads. Getting to work is not worth it. They will understand. So I look forward to coming down and seeing all of you guys, but I hope the haunt is still there and not flooded out, because there's an offshoot of the river that is right next to the haunt, I guess, in the Lynn County Fairgrounds. So they're trying to prepare for that as well, which would suck.
Yeah. Because
it's a brand new, huge, and it looks really good. I've been seeing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. So I'm really excited to see it, but I hope it's there, because I don't know what kind of shape the town's going to be in. I guess it's going to crest in a couple of days. But so that's just my personal weekly geekery, I guess.
Perfect.
So
I love
now,
it. Just take it. You can own it too.
News? I will. So move into the news with a little. And do you want to join me? Do you want to join me in my stupid
I don't think
voice
I can.
things?
No, I'm going to sit back and appreciate it live.
So we'll do the news. Thank you. You're kind.
Yeah.
We're going to start at Marvel. Start with Marvel Comics news. I got a little bit more info on Moo, which is their Monsters Unleashed thing. It looks like it's going to be an event book, so it's a 5-issue bi-weekly series starting in January. And what they're doing is they're taking all of those, like, I guess you would call them Silver Age. It's tough with Marvel because there were books that were back in the 40s, what we call the Golden Age, but a lot of Marvel is sort of considered Silver Age or even Bronze Age with the release of the first Spider-Man
ages,
comics.
Don't they, for Marvel?
They do, but we're going back to what I'll call Silver Age stuff, where they had giant monsters created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and they would just call them like Grumph, and this is sort of, it's where Groot came from, you know,
sure, yeah,
is just these sounds that they would make, and just, they would just write them, onomatopoeia, they just write them out, and that would be the name of these giant monsters that the Fantastic Four would fight or whatever. So the idea is all of those giant monsters, and I'm guessing it's going to be like Fin Fang Foom, the giant dragon, and all these things are going to get together and try and take over the Earth, and so all of the heroes get together to stop them. So each one is done by a different artist. It's going to be 30 pages per book, which is slightly more than, I think normal comics, I should know this, I want to say 22 or 23, not counting ads. So these are going to be 30 pages, which means they'll be doing these big splash pages, which is where the art is, it's one panel for the whole page, or double page splashes, or double page spreads. So it's one image and it covers the whole book when you open it up.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, hang on. Can I derail you? Do comics... I don't own a single physical comic. Do comics have ads in them?
Yes.
Like a lot?
Not a ton, but in general, you will have single-page ads. Oftentimes, they'll advertise other just other comic books. Video games are very common to be advertised in comics. There's almost always an ad on the back. For years, they did ads for, like, the milk ads,
Yeah. That's interesting to me because, I mean, with only having digital comics, I mean, sometimes if they're going to have like a spin-off series or have it split into a bunch of comics and then come back together later, you'll get like a preview of other ones at the back of a digital comic. But I don't think I've ever actually seen a straight up ad.
Yeah. And there was actually a big thing, I want to say it was this past year, where they did a half-page ad and fans were not happy because it was a Twix ad and they gave it a half page of the comic.
Was it just like suddenly Batman is just eating a Twix or like what?
No, I don't think so. It was a Twix ad, but it was just like the comic was the top half of the page, the ad was the bottom half of the page. And it's very weird to do that because part of the medium is the design of the layout.
Yeah, the flow of it.
And so you're completely disrupting that. And so it only happened the one time. I'm sure it was just them trying something new, but there was a lot of backlash on that.
Wow.
But yes, double page spread, splash pages. So if you are interested in Monsters Unleashed, it sounds like it's less of horror characters. I was thinking it might be like an October, surprise, here's Halloween books, but it's not. It's just a thing where it's a lot of the big monsters, and then all of the heroes need to get together to fight them. So that's that piece of news. Next, coloring books. There's a lot of them now, put out by many companies, including comic book companies, where they'll give you, comic scenes or panels and you get to, color in. You know what I'm talking about, adult coloring books.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about. They're really big right now. Like a lot of people are into them.
So here's where Marvel is going next. Connect the dots.
Marvel wants you to color their characters?
No, Marvel's put out coloring books. What they're doing now is they're putting out a Connect the Dots book.
Oh, actually, literally connect the dots.
Literally
I thought you were telling me
dots.
to connect the dots. I see.
No. So there's a company called, I think it's IllExpress or something, and they have a series called 1000 Dot to Dot. So it's like adult connect the dots where they're super intricate. And so Marvel is doing one, and it's $15. It comes out October 11th, and I might actually give it a shot. I used to love Connect the Dot as a kid, but the idea of doing like a massive 1000 dot, it feels like it would be almost really annoying while you're doing it, but once you're done, like that OCD thing of I finished it and sit back and all these little
like it's
tiny...
done now, you can appreciate it.
But it's like all these little tiny things you're doing, and then you sit back and it's all like one big thing. That feels like one of the most satisfying things you could do. If you're like me and have that, I don't say I have severe OCD, but like when I'm cleaning, like I'll very get nitpicky.
Yeah, I don't have like that type of personality, but it still might be interesting just to see like how they execute it, because like I kind of know what adult coloring books have now because they've been out for a while, but this sounds like something new. It might be, even if it's just a one time you pick it up just to check it out, it could be worth it.
Yeah, just for whatever.
And it would be fun to like do it and then hand it to my 6-year-old and give her a shot at it and see if she can do it, because she's good with her numbers. Like, how high can she count?
Yeah, no. Absolutely. Last piece for Marvel Comics news is the solicitations are out for December. I'm not going to do the big thing I did last time where I went through all the stuff, but I always like to pick out little cherry picking things of what's coming up in the comic books. So we are getting a handful of new series, and the notable ones we're getting is a book called Hulk, which is going to feature the now gray-skinned with green veins She-Hulk. And we're getting Hawkeye, which is going to focus on Kate Bishop, who is the teenage female Hawkeye, because there's 2 Hawkeyes right now. Captain Marvel, there's a new Captain Marvel series that's coming out that just, I think, is replacing the existing one. And then there's a Gamera ongoing series, if you remember Gamera from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
And so this features, we also still have the ongoing Thor book with a female Thor. We have All New Wolverine, which has a female Wolverine. There's a Spider-Woman book, Squirrel Girl, Gwen Poole, Spider-Gwen, Jessica Jones, Patsy Walker, a.k.a. Hellcat, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, Black Widow, Scarlet Witch. These are all female-led books that Marvel is putting out right now. And so this is
wait,
just kind of...
Spider-Gwen is coming back? Because I really liked those. Those were cool.
Yeah. Spider-Gwen is an actual ongoing right now.
Oh, wow. I see. This is one of the things that if you do my approach and you only get that subscription every 6 months, I run about 6 months behind. So I think last time I read, it was a couple months ago, I caught up through the end of Secret War is about where I stopped. So I don't
So
know
you're pretty
any
far
of
back
the new,
there.
any of the newer stuff.
Yeah, so at the results of, I think Spider-Gwen is still sort of in its own universe. I don't know if she's in the 616 proper right now. Miles Morales is. That was one of the things that came out of Secret War, was that the Miles Morales Spider-Man is now in the proper, what they call 616, is just Earth 616 is what they ascribe to the normal Marvel Comics universe.
Yep, right.
Yeah, but it's just the idea that right now there's a ton of books that are not only written by women, but that feature, and I'm not saying every one of these is written by women, but it's that they have female leads, which if you think 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, you didn't have that. Like, that wasn't a thing. Like, there was, every once in a while you would get a Miss Marvel miniseries or something, or She-Hulk is a series that lasted for a long time, but it's not just that, it's Hulk, Hawkeye, Wolverine, Thor, Captain Marvel, all traditionally male characters, male books, and they're all now female-led, as well as Iron Man. I totally forgot. So Iron Man also has Riri Williams. The character's name is Ironheart, but it's still, she's the main character of that Iron Man book. So Marvel totally doubling down on female-led books. Plus, cool thing, the Gamera book is being written by Nicole Perlman, who is one of the writers of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yeah, I really like seeing different takes on characters that are already existing. So, like, I'm all about this. I mean, I know some people get upset that, like, oh, they changed my character, or they put a new character in place of it and gave them the main title. But I think it's really, really interesting to see a new take on it like that.
Yeah, and all of the old stories still exist. You can go back and read them. And dollars to donuts or whatever, like, things are going to return to the status quo eventually.
They always kind of do.
You know, or even if there's a slight twist on the status quo. Because the classic stories are the ones being brought into mass media, being turned into TV shows, being turned into movies, they want that business to flow because you'll have millions of people watching a TV show. You're lucky to get 1 million people reading a comic book. You're lucky to get, 100,000 people reading a comic book. So they want to turn those viewers, the TV and film viewers, into comic book readers to get more money out of them, which means the comics eventually changed to mimic the movies, even though the movies started out mimicking the comic books until they handed them to movie executives. So I have my own issues with that because it's letting movie executives affect my comic books. And that to me is very wrong because they make lots of poor decisions.
Yeah, you get in this weird situation where both of them feed back into each other, and sometimes it's for the better and sometimes it's just for the worse. And it's like, who knows what you're going to get out of it.
Exactly. But in any case, so if you're looking for female-led books, I'm a big fan of the current Thor book. I think it's good. I've read good things about Wolverine, and I can't really say anything about the others because I have not read them. Well, Jessica Jones, because it is Brian Michael Bendis is coming back to write Jessica Jones, and he's the one that wrote the original Alias comic that introduced the character. So I
can definitely recommend Spider-Gwen. I mean, I can't recommend the current run because, like I said, I run about 6 months behind, but I read all of Spider-Verse and the Secret Wars stuff with all the different Spider-Men, Spider-Women, and the Spider-Gwen run was fantastic. So if they've kind of continued it from where they left off, it should be really good.
Yeah. Marvel movie news. Marvel is doing a contest for Doctor Strange that ties into STEM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. They're calling it Doctor Strange Magic of STEM, and specifically it's encouraging young women in grades 10 through 12, so in high school, to go out and learn more about STEM and STEM subjects. So to enter the contest, you would have to find a science-related question, seek out a mentor who can help you answer it, and then you create a 5-minute video sharing what you learned through that experience. The website for that is drstrangemagicofstem.com. I will provide a link in the show notes because that's very cool. I like that as far as contests go. And the prizes, I think the top prize is you get to go to the premiere. They fly you out to California. You get to walk the red carpet. And then there's several other tiers, I think, of prizes that you can win.
I'm super excited for that one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also just love Benny Batch. Like, anything that he's in, I tend to watch it eventually. And
I'm sorry.
I know. I call them Benny Batch. I'm going to go
Benny
with it anyway.
Batch.
Yeah.
Is that just you? Is that an original creation?
I don't think so. I feel like
Did you
I've
read
heard
that
it.
somewhere? Benny
And
Batch?
now you're making me question my own sanity.
No, I like it.
Yeah, it's whatever. He's good. I mean, he's good in everything, and he's not good in everything. He's good in like almost everything he does. I love Sherlock, like the BBC Sherlock. It's so good, and you know, he was Smog. Like he's been so many good characters, and just the fact that he's getting into the MCU, I'm super excited for it.
And I think it's a good piece of casting too. Yeah.
Yeah.
DC Comics. Here's kind of a nice story. DC and IDW Publishing are co-producing a comic called Love is Love. It's going to be a 144-page anthology whose proceeds will go to help the victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida. It's going to be entirely made up of 1 or 2-page stories from a wide variety of writers and artists. We have sort of seen this thing in the past, which is insane thinking of how long it's been, but after the 9/11 attacks, a lot of different comic publishers put out comics by their top artists and writers that specifically were created to have an influx of proceeds that then could be donated to funds for victims and families of workers and that sort of thing. This one is slightly different and a bit more rare in that the whole thing was spearheaded by a comic book writer rather than the companies. So this whole thing was spearheaded by Marco Andreyko, who has written several different things. I know him best as the writer who took over the Batwoman title from J.H. Williams when he left. But in any case, I just think this is very cool. The book costs $10. The article I read didn't say when it was coming out, but I was talking to a friend, and I think he said December is when it might be coming out. I'll certainly be picking it up, and I'll give you guys a review when that comes out. But I like seeing those sorts of stories where, you know, they stop and say, great, we're doing this and we're making money, but we're going to stop doing what we're doing right now so we can do something to help somebody else.
And the part about each story being only like 1 or 2 pages, that's intriguing for me. Like, how can you effectively tell a story in like such a short format? That could be really interesting to see the end result.
And sometimes it's just sort of a pinup gallery thing. I believe the Marvel 9/11 one, it had a couple stories in it of like Spider-Man, like their characters based in New York. Here's how Spider-Man reacted to this happening. Here's how Captain America reacted to this happening. But then some of them were just, you know, here's an Alex Ross painting he did just for this kind of thing. So some of it I think is probably just going to be just art and then maybe a single or 2-page story. But so keep an eye out for that, certainly. Obviously, you know, everything they get helps, and you get a cool comic in return. DC movie news. I just have one piece of DC movie news, and it's sort of fun. Fast food chain Whataburger is currently talking with DC to make sure that the recent trademark that DC did of the latest Wonder Woman logo isn't impeaching upon the flying W logo for Whataburger. Now, I have always looked at that logo as being the Wonder Woman logo. Like, every time I see the Whataburger logo, because it's just W stacked on top of one another. It looks like the Winnebago logo, and it looks like the Wonder Woman logo. So there is and I'm just going to flat out say this because I don't think this is defamation or anything. I don't think I can legally get in trouble for this. There's a stupid statement that was made by a Whataburger spokesperson, how they're like, we support superheroes and we love Wonder Woman and we think that there should be a team up between the Justice League and our own hero, What-A-Guy. And you're like, what are you doing? So I don't know. Like, I don't think it's an attention grab so more people pay attention to Whataburger. My guess, they say it's friendly talks. They're not really talking about suing anybody or whatever. They're like, we trust we'll come to, you know, an agreement we both like. I wonder if they want to try and talk to DC and be like, hey, so here's what's going to happen. We don't sue you and we get your Wonder Woman stuff. So they become their product tie-in. Because when they trademarked the latest Wonder Woman logo for the movie and stuff, it included, food and drink products so that it can go on food and beverages and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the smart move. I have absolutely no idea. I just thought that was an incredibly stupid story, but it's fun because it's sort of how,
It is fun.
comic books are affecting the wider world. Because they've had these logos for years.
Yeah, you get into like a prior art debate there, and I mean, they can prove that they've been using a Wonder Woman logo for quite a while. Like, I know
Right.
it's a new version of it, but still.
Exactly. But in any case, that's our DC news. So we're going to go bop, dum, 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 and our Indie Comics news, which is a section where I'll do Valiant and Image and anything that's not the big two. I have one piece of news. I want no commentary on this. It is simply this. Valiant Comics is doing a series of cat cosplay photo variant covers. That's all I'm going to say about that. Bop-doo, dap-doo, dap-ba-da-bop-ba-doom-bop-doop-doo-dap, wow, dib-a-dib-a-dip, reviews. And thank you for not chiming in on that. It's just the dumbest thing in the world. Anyway, I get it. People have been doing variant covers and cosplay covers, so they're doing ones with people dressing up their cats. I'm not a cat person. I'm historically not a cat person. Though, and I feel ashamed saying this, I went to Pottermore, where you can, the new quiz to figure out what your Patronus is.
Yeah,
and
like you do.
And it gave me a cat.
Oh, man.
I kind of wanted to chuck my phone across the room.
I got a mongrel dog. I don't know what that says about me.
I don't remember the
said.
type of cat. I didn't care. Yeah, a
It
mongrel.
did not say a breed of dog or dog.
It's
It
just
was
a mongrel.
mongrel dog.
Well, that just means it's a mixed breed.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, reviews. So I only have... Well, I have more, but there are only 2 books that I was set to read this week. First up is Green Lanterns number 7. This was a good issue. They just finished up their first sort of big arc where they're fighting the Red Lanterns. So this is sort of this downtime episode, if you will, in their story. I really liked it. So it's the 2 new lanterns hanging out at Simon Baz's house while he's about to have his mom over, tell her for the first time that he's actually a Green Lantern. He's trying to bake these Lebanese cookies for the first time in his life, and he's terrible at it. So it's very lighthearted. It almost had a Buffy feel to it, and I just say that because I'm a Buffy fan, but where it's, those in-between episodes where we're going to take a second, we're going to breathe, we're going to allow some humor to flow in, let our characters interact. And I've always talked about how I like the character interactions, but this issue in particular, like, I would love if this is what Green Lanterns turns into, because I would love one Green Lantern book that is much more fun and lighthearted and is about these new Green Lanterns sort of figuring things out and finding their way in the world of superheroics. And then there's Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps, and let that be the more serious, more bombastic kind of Green Lantern book because they're out in space. I grew up with the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, which was almost always kept on Earth. So it was relatable and they had darker stories and stuff, but it was always sort of had that feel to it where other Green Lantern books, and especially since then, it's all been space cop, and space wars and all of this big stuff. So I would love if they were able to do that and find those independent tones. From Marvel, I read Mighty Thor number 11, which had a weird plot twist. Last issue, the end was that Thor had been shot by a gold bullet that was turning her into gold, and Jane Foster showed up to help. What? Because Jane Foster is Thor. So it turned out, and so big spoilers here, kids. 3, 2, and 1. It wasn't Jane Foster that showed up. It was Mjolnir, the hammer. We'll let that sink in for a second.
I'm trying to understand. I'm letting it sink.
The hammer showed up as Jane Foster. So apparently, we've never seen this before in the comics, that the hammer not only impersonated a person, but could speak and hear, because it was saying, like, so Thor's injured, and Thor is Jane Foster, and so this other Jane Foster shows up and just says, I'll explain later, think what I need to do to help you with your medical training, and I will hear your thoughts and do it. And we find out eventually it was the hammer itself there. Really kind of weird territory there as far as the hammer having a say, but maybe we'll find out more later on. I kind of have my own personal theories of what this might mean, because if I remember correctly, Thor's mother, I feel like, did something to the hammer so that Jane Foster was the one that picked it up, or something along those lines. So my thought is maybe the reason the hammer is doing so much, because in this run, normally it's just a hammer. You know, Thor throws it, grabs onto the end of it. That's how he flies, which is ridiculous, but we'll go with it. He can call it back to him, and that's it. But in this iteration, not only do we have, and because you read the first 2 arcs of Thor: God of Thunder.
Yeah, I read Thor: God of Thunder. That's actually still one of my favorite set of comic arcs with the God Killer and all that. Those are really good.
And this isn't as good. This is good, but not quite that level.
I started reading this current run with Jane as Thor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's interesting that they did something so different with it.
Yeah, so the, unlike, but even in those arcs where it was still Thor, Odin's son, the Thor most people know as Thor, he was referring to Mjolnir as almost a person, like it had feelings or emotions. So the seeds were sort of set there, but in this one, like, Jane Foster is able to just mentally control the hammer, and it can fly around the room and hit a bunch of people and return to her, instead of just throwing it and then calling it back to yourself. So that's where it started, was them saying, no one's ever done that with the hammer before. And now, apparently, it's its own person. But it's just very weird. It's still an interesting read. I like Jason Aaron. There's a reason he won the Eisner for Best Writer. It has yet to hit that same level it was at with the God of Thunder. That is still by far the best, but I keep reading because I feel like it's going to hopefully at some point complete this War of the Realms arc. I feel like the stories have gotten smaller, and I'm hoping it'll expand back out again because that's really where I thought it was doing its best. The other things that I read, I did finish the first giant volume of Knightfall, which is a story where Bane breaks Batman's back. It was pretty good. It's very 90s. I read this via the Hoopla app, so I got it digitally from my local library. I did get the next volume, but they're just like hundreds and hundreds and 600 some odd pages or something. So I haven't started it yet because I'm a little hesitant to do so because I don't want to lock myself in if there's other things I want to read. So instead what I did is I downloaded American Vampire Volume 1 via the Hoopla app, and I read that because I'm trying to sort of get myself set for Halloween. I'm a huge Halloween guy. I'm a big vampire guy. And so I downloaded that. It's an interesting take on the vampire mythos, so I'll probably continue reading it. The story is co-written by Scott Snyder and Stephen King. Half of the story takes place in the 20s, and half of it takes place in like the 1800s during the Wild West, where this new breed of American vampire is created that can walk in the sunlight and that sort of thing. So it's jumping back and forth between these two stories that are loosely connected. And it was cool. I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed that it was split because I could read half of the comic book and go to bed if I wanted to. For the pull list for next week, I have Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps #5, Wonder Woman #7, Saga 38, and the Doctor Strange annual is coming out. I don't know if I'm going to pick it up. I mean, probably, but usually annuals might have something that'll tie into the regular book, but other times it's just sort of its own story. So if you want to see what Doctor Strange is like, that might be a good thing to pick up. But I'm sort of dedicating myself to the ongoing story, so I'm kind of hesitant to pick up anything that's off on the side. And then finally, I downloaded the book Wytches with a Y, so Wyches. It is a horror book. I'm looking for something scary to read as I move towards Halloween, so I'm hoping Wytches is a good read. I want to say I also read very good things about this as it was coming out, so I was happy to see that the library had it.
Is Saga worth... Okay, I've tried to get into Saga a couple times. I noticed it's on your pull list for next week.
Yes.
Do I need to give it another shot? I feel like I've heard so much about Saga, and I've read the first issue, maybe the first two, and it didn't really do anything for me.
Oh, no. Pick up a trade.
Okay.
Your library will almost definitely have it because it's a massively popular read. It's Brian K. Vaughan. It's the same guy that wrote Y: The Last Man.
Do I just need to give it more time to build up?
It's a story, yeah. The difference is with Y: The Last Man, you kind of immediately know what the story is.
You get the premise, yeah.
Right. With books like Saga and Paper Girls, which is another one he's writing, he's really taking his time to tell his story, and it goes on a lot of weird twists and turns. You sort of get the premise of Saga, it's very much like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're from two different worlds that are at war. They have a child that's not supposed to exist, but it's so different from that, and it's very soap opera, operatic, episodic TV show kind of thing, where it isn't necessarily one event leads to the other because that event must follow this one. It jumps around a bit. There's some time jumps in there because by this point in the book, the without trying to spoil too much for you if you're going to go read it, the child is no longer a baby. It's now a child who can walk around and talk.
Yeah.
And other characters have come and gone. It's convoluted enough where I feel like it's one that I'm probably going to have to go back and read. Like maybe another one I'll read is Rachel Rising, now that it's completely out and I can reread it from the beginning. I have trouble with long winding stories that are total stories. It's a total package, but it's like 50 issues, 30 issues.
Like, yeah, if you have a month between each one, that can get difficult. And maybe that was my problem. I think when I tried it, there weren't a whole lot of them out. And I just tried the first couple and like I didn't quite get it all the way. I should probably just go pick up the digital equivalent of a trade for the first 10 or whatever.
Or like I said, go to the library. I know via the Hoopla app, my library has like the first several trades for Saga. So yeah, pick up one, pick up two, read it and focus. It's a character-driven story more so than a narrative. It's not really story-driven. Things happen, but it's very much we're throwing these characters in. Let's see how they react in these situations.
I will give it another shot.
Yeah. And I, especially, and not knowing a ton about Final Fantasy, but knowing there's some different sort of weird characters in those sorts of games and JRPGs, I think you'll dig it. Like, there's a character named, I believe, Gus or Goose, depending on how it's pronounced, and it's a little anthropomorphic seal. So it's a little seal man who wears, like, yellow overalls, and he's awesome.
Nice.
Like, there's so much weird stuff in these books. So, yes, definitely give it a shot. Don't let your kids see it. It's pretty adult. But yes. And then for my archive pick, since I was talking about Halloween, and it's hard for me to keep trying to come up with archive stuff, so I just kind of look over to my shelf of trades, and I've yet to say The Long Halloween. So as we're getting there, as October is about to hit, pick it up. It's considered one of the greatest Batman stories ever. It's by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. It spawned a sequel. It kind of has one that came before it that was a collection of stories called Haunted Night. And then they said, we want to do a big one. And that became The Long Halloween. And it is heralded as one of the best Batman stories out there. So if you haven't read it yet, do it. Again, it's probably another one you can get at the library because it's very prolific. Do you have an archive pick? Is there something, it doesn't have to be a comic book. Is there something that you would point people towards?
Oh man, I didn't know. On the spot?
Totally on the spot. Like if somebody came to you and said, I'm thinking about reading comic books, what would you say?
I like a lot of ones that aren't huge, like mainstream. I mean, I would gladly recommend either of the two that I'm really into, Rat Queens or Wayward, which I mentioned up front. I would also say, if I have to dig back into the archive, something I haven't read in a while, but I would recommend, there's a series, and I'm going to get the names not quite right because I didn't look this up beforehand, but it's like Mary Jane, and Mary Jane loves Spider-Man, and Spider-Man loves Mary Jane. There's like 3 different runs, and they're all variations on that same naming structure, and they're really, really good. They're some of my favorite things from Marvel, and it's all like Spider-Man told from Mary Jane's perspective in high school. And it just kind of works for some reason. And I like those a lot. I would recommend them.
Perfect. Well, that's cool. Yeah. And I want to say, you and I have talked about that in the past. I have never read them. So that might be something I'm going to have to go seek out.
They're pretty quick runs, too. They don't drag on at all. They're all in that like 10 to 15 issue range. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, we've been babbling on long enough. Let's move into the topic of the week, shall we? Shall we? Shall me? Shall me and you? Me and you, Void. Let's we shall.
I think we shall.
Topic of the week. Welcome to the Comic Box 101. This week's lesson, who is Luke Cage?
I don't know. That's why I'm here. Was that a question for me, or was it rhetorical?
I think it was rhetorical. It's cool. Yeah, who is Luke? Well, do you know? So you've seen Jessica Jones?
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said up front, I love the MCU. I really like the corner of the MCU that Netflix has kind of carved out, and I've watched all of it. So I saw Daredevil season 1. I didn't love it, but I saw the potential there, and I did watch all of it. And in the end, I'm glad I watched it, even though I wouldn't really rewatch season 1. Then I watched Jessica Jones, and it blew me away. I think it's probably the best thing that the MCU has put out, like in any medium, is Jessica Jones, that whole season. And then I watched Daredevil season 2, and I really liked season 2 of Daredevil, like the whole thing, especially Punisher. I had never really gotten into Punisher as a character, even though I know that you love him. Um, like, I just didn't know anything about him basically going in, except that he had the skull on the thing. And by the end of season 2 of Daredevil, I wanted more Punisher in that world. So yeah, I've seen all of the Netflix MCU, and basically everything I know about Luke Cage is from Jessica Jones.
Okay. Perfect. Well, we will cover that. First, here's the real world info. So here's the and I suppose we should preface this. A lot of this is going to be comic book history, but because we don't know what's happening in the show, I cannot tell you what is or is not spoilers. So you have been warned. I'll try and preface anything that I think will definitely be a spoiler or potential spoiler. But to start, here's the outside real world info. Luke Cage was created by Archie Goodwin, John Romita Sr., and George Tuska, first appearing in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1 in June 1972, shortly after the blaxploitation films emerged as a popular film genre. He is sometimes credited as the first African-American character to star in their own comic book, but I've seen other things claiming that as well, so we'll say he's certainly one of the first African-American characters to have their own comic book. With issue number 17, the series was renamed Luke Cage Power Man. And then as blaxploitation films and as also martial arts films started fading in popularity, they combined Power Man with Iron Fist for Power Man and Iron Fist, which got renamed that at issue 50, and then that was the name of the comic book until it was canceled with issue 125 in 1986. So for the bulk of the Luke Cage comic book, it was called Power Man and Iron Fist. Since then, he has had a series simply called Cage in 1992 that ran for 20 issues, and there was a book called Heroes for Hire, which lasted for about 19 issues, and then Brian Michael Bendis, creator of Jessica Jones, picked up the character and then rolled him into Alias, which is sort of, Alias was before the Alias television show, so the original Jessica Jones comic was actually called Alias. So that is part of comic book canon as well, is that Luke Cage is part of Jessica Jones' I guess, sort of origin story. But Brian Michael Bendis wrote Alias, Secret War, The Pulse, which was sort of the sequel to Alias, Daredevil, and New Avengers. And so he always kept Luke Cage. He's sort of a favorite character, I guess, of Brian Michael Bendis. And then he was a main fixture in the Thunderbolts and became the leader of the Thunderbolts. He's been the leader of a team of Avengers. So certainly in recent years, since he was picked up by Brian Michael Bendis, he's become a larger fixture in the Marvel Universe. I can't really remember reading a lot of Power Man books growing up. Like maybe he was in some of the team books or the big event books like the Infinity... I don't even think he was in Infinity Gauntlet. You know, it was always just sort of, you had Power Man and Iron Fist, and they were just this weird team of, hey, here's some stuff that was popular in the 70s. You know, this blaxploitation character and this martial arts guy, which is a white dude who travels to, at the time, the Orient to learn kung fu secrets.
But I mean, that's we're getting that too. That's part of the Netflix MCU that's coming up.
Yes, it is.
So,
yes,
like,
it is.
Are they going to pull directly from that, do you think, for inspiration for Iron Fist? Because that's next up, right after Luke Cage.
As a comic book guy, I cannot tell you that there is a definitive Luke Cage or Power Man and Iron Fist story because I can't think of one. So it doesn't live on the level of an Infinity Gauntlet or a Spider-Man clone saga or even Fatal Attractions, which was the X-Men story where Wolverine got the adamantium ripped out of his body by Magneto. Like there's just those big stories that kind of everybody knows. Yeah. I can't think of a Power Man and Iron Fist story. So
okay.
But so here is his comic book origin, and it looks from the trailers like we're going to get a part of this, so potential spoilers. So Luke Cage's real name is actually Carl Lucas. He was born and raised in Harlem, and he was a criminal. He was in and out of gangs. He was a high school dropout, committing petty crimes, getting in gang fights, in and out of group homes. Eventually, he goes straight, but his like best friend goes up the ranks and becomes a big-time criminal. And there's a period where he then gets jumped by the mob, and Carl Lucas, we're just going to call him Luke Cage from here on out, but just keep in mind his name was Carl Lucas at the time, jumps in and saves him. So for interfering, the mob plants heroin in Luke Cage's apartment, tips off the police, and so he goes to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Even though he was a criminal as a child, it was him as a teenager growing up. So he goes to prison for a crime he didn't commit. He gets into fights. He tries to escape. They send him to a high-security prison. And there he volunteers for, and this is a quote directly from this page of the comic, because I looked this up, electrobiochemical system for stimulating human cell regeneration. Now, this is the stories obviously get retconned over the years as they try and freshen them up. So I don't know if this was in the original comic, but as it exists today, it was based on a variant of the super soldier process. So they're doing it on prisoners, and he gets told that if he volunteers for this program, it might get him out early on parole. So he says, okay, he goes into it. It's just supposed to help, like I said, human cell regeneration. But there was an abusive guard who had a beef with Luke Cage. He cranks up the controls on the machine to try and kill him. Instead, it gives him super strength and durability, where he has, like he says in Jessica Jones, I'm unbreakable. So it gives him, quote, unbreakable skin. He escapes prison, goes back to New York, and here's another interesting thing. He starts using his powers immediately to make money. It isn't a with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing. Like, he breaks out of prison, he goes back to New York, eventually he changes his name to Luke Cage and wears a weird costume, hoping that people won't recognize him. But he goes back and immediately thinks he's going to start making money with it. Now, in 2012, they rebooted the origin and said that he started out using his powers to rob banks and then quits when a guard is shot by a member of his crew. And then you find out that the money that he's been making as this, quote, hero for hire was to help pay for a better life for that guard that was paralyzed. But in general, and I think we're not going to see a lot of this in this show. I'll just say that now. I don't think we're going to get the hero for hire thing. I think we're going to get he learns that he needs to take care of his neighborhood and the people close to him. You know, that's kind of my guess. But in the comic book, he's always been sort of an anti-hero because whatever he does for money.
That's interesting. That and I know what you're saying. They probably aren't going to go that route. It doesn't feel like that fits the character they've already established in Jessica Jones, and this is that character but moved ahead in time. So
right, like in the comics, he befriends the Fantastic Four when he runs into them while trying to collect a fee from a job he did for Doctor Doom. Like, and keep in mind, it was a different time when those books were being put out. That's not an excuse. Yeah. But he was supposed to be based off sort of these blaxploitation characters of the big tough black guy and the villain's a white guy kind of thing.
But it's still good to know that, like, that's where it's from. Like, that's the origin of it. And to see how they take the source material and, like, you know, it's a huge adaptation from that source material to what we have today. And, like, without seeing the show, like, from the trailers and from what we've seen in Jessica Jones, you know that, like, that can't be the way they go with it.
Right. They're totally going to do, you know, I don't know that it's going to be somebody gets hurt and we get the Spider-Man origin, you know, great power, great responsibility. But you almost get that where he's talking to the older guy and he's telling him, like, you got to be helping people. Where in the comics, it's very much like, hey, I could be making money doing this. So, like, okay, so the Defenders. And this is definitely not a spoiler because this is totally different. Because the Defenders comic book was Namor, the Submariner, Hulk, and Doctor Strange. And they fought mostly mystical or supernatural things. So this Defender show that's going to be coming out is very much like they're just using the name.
Wait, so I guess I didn't realize this. The source material for the Defenders doesn't actually have these characters at all?
Mostly. Luke Cage was on the team from time to time, and eventually Luke Cage did become a regular part of the Defenders. And here's the fun thing. The only reason he did it was because they kept him on retainer. And then eventually he still figures he doesn't really belong with those characters, or with those characters, but you get what I mean. He figures he doesn't belong in the team and resigns from the team. So Luke Cage was on the team. He started out as sort of a regular guest member in the Defenders and then eventually joined the team because they paid him. But beyond that, yeah, it was always like Namor, Hulk, Doctor Strange, and in my mind, the Silver Surfer was the other member. And yeah, it was like they fought supernatural enemies. It has nothing to do with street level stuff. It has nothing to do with keeping New York safe. It was totally different. They were considered sort of a non-team in that every member on the team was known as a loner. You don't think of Doctor Strange as somebody who has a team.
No.
You know, and so they called themselves a non-team. And so it's totally different. So as far as I know, Iron Fist, definitely Jessica Jones, and probably Daredevil and Punisher, of course, as far as I'm aware, were never a member of the Defenders.
And it really does feel like the Defenders they're building towards right now is this street-level New York team is what we're working towards. Whereas, like, the rest of the MCU is, like, cosmic level eventually, because we know Thanos is coming up eventually.
Right.
But yeah, this much more focused, just New York, and they're, like, slowly making connections.
And there was never really a team, as far as I know, that did that. And I say that knowing that there was a book called Marvel Knights, which was sort of a team book that was Daredevil, Punisher. Marvel Knights was an imprint they did that was slightly more gritty, grounded, and a little more adult. Eventually they would have a Marvel Max line where you could actually swear and have nudity and stuff in it. But at the time it was Marvel Knights, and you had a Punisher book, you had a Daredevil book. I don't know if Iron Fist was there. I know they had a Spider-Man one, which I thought was odd. But so there was this team called Marvel Knights that was sort of these street-level people. But in general, I don't believe they were called the Marvel Knights, obviously. So yeah, in that sense, I will say there has never been sort of this street-level team. I mean, you have teams like the New Warriors, or for a while there were the Slingers, which is its own whole thing I won't get into. I will say, though, there are some things that we've seen in Netflix that do tie in. Dr. Claire Temple, Rosario Dawson in the Netflix shows.
This was going to be one of my questions for you, is how do you think... it seems like she's the one that's going to tie the team together, because she's the only character that's kind of been consistent throughout, ever since the beginning.
And here's the thing. She is a character from the Luke Cage comic book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So in the comic, Luke Cage dates Dr. Claire Temple. However, it is very different from the version we see. The Netflix version is a cross between that character, and I think mostly just the name, and a comic book called Night Nurse, which was about, I think, a number of nurses that just worked the late shift in sort of the Marvel universe or something. It was an older book. And then eventually there was a character just known as Night Nurse that would like patch up superheroes and stuff.
And that's basically what she is now.
Yes. So for the most part, she's Night Nurse. But the name, Dr. Claire Temple, was actually a character that Luke Cage dates in the thing, as well as Misty Knight, which is going to be a character in the upcoming show. And like, I think now in the comics, she even has like a metal arm and stuff. I don't know if that's spoiler territory, but I believe in the comics, she's also super powered now, and has super strength. So I don't know. That might have been spoilers, but we don't know. I have no idea.
We don't know. I mean, the show's not out yet.
From here on out, spoilers, you're going to hear names of characters that will be in the Netflix show, and I am going to tell you what they are in the comic books for a frame of reference. So from here on out, I guess we'll say spoilers.
But it's all speculation because the show isn't out yet.
Yes. So in the comics, Luke Cage is blackmailed into abducting Detective Misty Knight, who was not his girlfriend, but was the girlfriend of Iron Fist. And that's how they sort of start working together, is when Luke Cage and Iron Fist meet, it's because Luke Cage is blackmailed into abducting Misty Knight, and Misty Knight was Iron Fist's girlfriend. And so they work together to free her, and that's when he legally changes his name to Luke Cage, or Lucas Cage, I guess. And then he actually works for Misty Knight's detective agency for a while, and that's when Luke Cage and Iron Fist become best friends, and then Luke Cage breaks it off with Claire and ends up dating a model or whatever. So I don't know, because they built up like a Matt Murdock, Claire Temple sort of love story thing, and then we're like, but it's not going to work out. But then we also have Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, which did happen in the comics. In the comics, it was very much sort of a one-night stand. And here's the big spoiler. So I'm just going to drop this. Are you okay with me dropping this?
I am. I mean, the show is an adaptation. So yeah, I want all of the spoilers from the comics. I'm not worried about it because the show is its own thing and I'm excited for it, whether or not I know this stuff or not from the comics.
And this, honestly, you could learn by picking up any comic book right now with Jessica Jones or Luke Cage in it. The one-night stand that Jessica Jones has with Luke Cage results in her becoming pregnant. And she has the kid, and later on, they end up getting married. So right now in the comic books, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones are married, and they have a daughter, and her babysitter is Squirrel Girl.
I love that.
Which is part of how Squirrel Girl got popular again. So there are other things in the comics. He dates She-Hulk for a while. The cool thing is that he has a one-night stand with Jessica Jones in the comic, the original Alias comic. And this is a thing that I thought was a missed opportunity in the shows, especially in Jessica Jones, was because they worked together as bodyguards for Matt Murdock for a while.
Oh, okay.
And I can
see how that would work.
Right, because when Jessica Jones gets arrested in the Netflix show,
yeah.
the attorney that comes to help her is Matt Murdock. And that whole other character, Carrie-Anne Moss's character and all of that, as far as I'm aware, are original creations for the show.
And I wonder how much of that is them trying to really keep these characters separate in these self-contained stories until we get to the Defenders.
Or very loosely connect them. And I understand the decisions they made. Like in the comics, the Purple Man is actually purple.
Right.
And he's called the Purple Man instead of Kilgrave.
David Tennant was, oh my gosh, he was killer in that role. It was so good.
Was. And here's what they are doing for this one. While we're talking about this, let's just move on and start talking about the Netflix show now.
Yeah.
So in the Netflix history, Luke Cage is introduced in the Jessica Jones show pretty early on. They also start up a relationship. I don't know if it's just considered a one-night stand in the...
I don't think it's really explicitly spelled out.
Yeah, where we find out Luke Cage had a wife. There is no Reva Connors in the comic book, as far as I know. So that's a huge change. Because in the comics, or in the show, he's driven by this death of his wife, who, spoilers, we found out was the result of Kilgrave telling Jessica Jones to kill her because she held information on the purple... You know, they're... As only a movie or television show can, everything syncs up very nicely with their stories. Not the case in the comics at all. There is no dead wife. It isn't Jessica Jones' fault. There's none of that stuff. So in the show, eventually there's a fight between the two. Luke Cage gets mind controlled. He gets shot point blank with a shotgun. Then basically kind of wakes up and leaves. Like he's not in the finale of Jessica Jones, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he just kind of walks out of the story, and we know that we'll get back to him when we get to his own show.
Right. In this one, my understanding is he's still out. He's still sort of hiding out. And while we're talking about villains, the villain in this series is Cornell Stokes, also known as Cornell Cottonmouth, or just Cottonmouth, who's sort of this Godfather-type crime boss in the show. He is a Luke Cage villain. He first appeared in Power Man 18 in June 1974 as a drug lord. But I just wanted to say that like these other Netflix shows, you know, they found their formula. This will be a split story between Luke Cage and Cornell Cottonmouth. So we will be spending, if not equal time, just like we did with Jessica Jones and Kilgrave, just like we did with The Punisher in Season 2 of Daredevil, just like we did with Wilson Fisk in Season 1 of Daredevil, we are going to be spending significant amounts of time with the villain building their character. And I think that's an awesome idea.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes for more impact when things come to a head towards the end, because you're invested in both characters. You don't necessarily like both characters, but you can actually understand all the underlying motivations, which it makes it so different than like an MCU movie where the big bad is a big bad because they're a big bad, you know, or they have a glowy thing that they have to deal with. I mean, Civil War was a little different. They did better there. But for the most part, if you look at the MCU movies, it's like, oh yeah, he's bad because he's bad.
But you don't really, like Civil War, their big bad is Zemo. And you don't really know a whole lot. You don't really get to know Zemo.
Not really until the end. You kind of understand why he's doing it, which is a little bit more motivation than they give most villains.
But they don't flesh out his character. It's the reason they did good by Loki, is they fleshed out his character early in Thor, so that when you got to Avengers, it was okay. Even though he was still very much kind of a generic villain, and as Kevin Smith likes to say, his Loki pokey stick, is sort of a silly story thing. But no, you are totally right. The MCU does not give us time to get to know. They've been teasing Thanos for like 4 movies now, 5 movies, whatever it is.
A long time.
But we don't know anything about his character, and I don't know if we're gonna.
I hope they develop that.
That would be great because, and I just know it's not going to happen. They don't do it in the cartoons. In the cartoons, he's just a big muscly guy. I feel that's probably the way they're going to do it in the movies, I mean. But I love Thanos. Like when he's written by Jim Starlin, and he's like this philosopher guy who is evil and will kill lots of people for fun and take over planets and destroy galaxies and whatever. But he's a much more compelling character. He doesn't have the righteousness that, say, Magneto kind of does, where you can sort of understand where he's coming from, but just showing him as a more intelligent character. But so in this one, we are going to get it. And so here is some backstory to Cottonmouth. In the comic books, he is the drug lord whose heroin was stolen by the mob in order to frame Luke Cage. Are you with me there?
I got
when
it.
I say
yeah.
that?
Yep.
So the mob steals heroin. They stole it from Cottonmouth. So once Cage returns to New York with his powers, Cottonmouth tries to recruit him and sends, apparently his thing is he sends snakes to people. That's his trademark.
Hence his name.
So he sends them to Luke Cage's office because in the comic books, he holds an office above a theater. He's not a bar owner. That's the other thing in the comic books. He might now in order to reflect things, but at the time he helped run a theater.
Okay.
Along with his henchmen, and I hope these guys show up in the show. His henchmen are named Mike and Ike. And so Cage beats the hell out of him and then agrees to work for Cottonmouth in an attempt to locate he sort of gets blackmailed into it. Cage gets blackmailed into working for Cottonmouth, and supposedly Cottonmouth has the records that prove that Luke Cage was framed and that it wasn't his heroin. So he actually goes about committing crimes for Cottonmouth. He works for him for a while. Then he learns, eventually he has a big fight with Cottonmouth. We find out that, spoilers, Cottonmouth is also super strong and has filed his teeth down into fangs. And we learn that these files are actually kept in a henchman's photographic memory. They're not physical. And we find out that this is a particular henchman who, during this fight, got shoved out a window, fell, and died. So now we know there's no way to exonerate Luke Cage. So he beats up Cottonmouth, quits, obviously, calls the cops, and then later on he shows up as like a pimp or something and a drug dealer later on. But that's really his big story. So if there is a story they're pulling from the comics, I'm guessing it would be this thing that I'm assuming starts off in Power Man 18 way back in the 70s, where this is a guy who may or may not have the evidence proving that Luke Cage is innocent. And so Luke Cage actually goes and commits some small crimes for him in order to try and get in good with his organization. And then in the end, he basically loses. And so just beats up Cottonmouth. So I don't know what the story is going to be for this one, but that's the background of that character. So that's who our villain is. My understanding is in this one, they're very much building him up to be like gangster level, like 90s East Coast rap kind of drug lord sort of thing.
Are we thinking that he's going to be like an equal to Fisk, maybe?
Kind of. I think they're going to build him up as a Harlem version, but I don't think he's going to think as big as Fisk. Because Fisk's whole thing is like global. He's working with the Hand, and he's working with, the mob, and where this is just I'm in charge, my neighborhoods, my money, and I'm going to, where I guess they have the whole Hell's Kitchen thing with Wilson Fisk, but it seems like his plans are definitely bigger than that.
Sure, I see where you're coming from.
Where he wants to control everything, this guy is very much just that Scarface, I am the biggest person you will, run into in this area. Look at how awesome I am. It's more internal. Fisk is more external.
Yeah. So, so one of my questions was along these lines, like with the villain and the bad guys. So you think he's like the big bad. Do we think that they're going to have multiple villains or like multiple roles? I mean, Daredevil season 2 kind of did this, where they really advertised up front a bunch of stuff about Punisher, and then Elektra was kind of there, a little bit in the advertising. But then when you actually watch the show, there was the second half of the season that was about something that wasn't really advertised?
I
Like, is there a
don't.
possibility for that?
I guess there always is, but unless they use it to try and set up Iron Fist or something, I don't. I think Marvel is smarter than that, at least over at Netflix, that they're doing one villain at a time. Like Daredevil, yes, but that's season 2.
That is season 2. That's true.
So, I mean, yes, you had Stick and you had these other characters, but it was our villain is Fisk, our hero is Daredevil. We still need to introduce both of these people to you because nobody needs Spider-Man's origin again. Nobody needs Superman's origin. Nobody needs Batman.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who Power Man is. And they're not going to call him Power Man. They're going to, he's just Luke Cage. I assume if they call him Power Man, that'd be ridiculous.
So, I mean, in lieu of like that, in lieu of having another villain or a twist like that, is there anything, I mean, because you did the research here, is there any like big set piece or event that happens in Luke Cage? Is there something that's like defining that was really, really cool, or a huge event that might get adapted for this?
I don't know. I think there's this story, and there's certainly things that have happened to him over the period of the comics. You know, he fights, like the original Power Man is actually a villain, and Luke Cage just fights him for the ability to use the name Power Man and wins, and so he gets to call himself Power Man.
Okay.
Like there are things in the comics, but I don't think there's anything that works on this normal street level issue. I mean, there are times in the comics where the issue of him having unbreakable skin is he can still suffer internal trauma. Like he has regenerative capabilities, he is super strong, he is extra durable, but maybe we'll end up seeing some of that as another thing. But I feel like it's going to be more like Jessica Jones, where there are other people she deals with and she has to fight Power Man and whatever, but you know, you have the one main villain.
Yeah.
And I think Daredevil just worked that way because it was talking about a town. Daredevil's story is very much his, but also the story of Hell's Kitchen is Daredevil season 1. Because there's all these people who want to do different things with this particular neighborhood of New York, this particular area of New York.
Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, that kind of ties into one of my other main questions. You mentioned that he like has unbreakable skin. Like,
Yes.
What is his exact power set? And I kind of know it already because I watched the show, but
Yeah.
I'm more wondering, like, how does he get in danger? Like, what's his weakness? What's something that could actually threaten him and make us feel like, uh-oh, you know, for that character? Because everything we've seen in Jessica Jones, he can just walk into anywhere, do whatever he wants. He's not going to get hurt, and there's no real risk. Like, how do you put risk into this particular character?
So, as I understand it, his power set is he is super strong. Part of that comes from this unbreakable skin thing. And then he has the regenerative capabilities, which I think is the idea of if
You
you
heal
get
faster.
if you well, it's just the internal damage kind of thing. Like if you
Yeah.
get hit by a tennis ball that's coming really, really fast, like it's not necessarily going to break the skin. It's not going to go through you, but it's going to hurt you internally. You're going to get a welt or whatever. You know, you can suffer internal damage. So that's always the issue is if he's bleeding internally, you can't save Luke Cage unless he's able to heal. If you suffocate him, he will die. If you drown him, he will die. He could die in a fire. So he has these, he's extra durable and he's extra strong, but beyond that, as I understand it, he's pretty much a normal guy. I don't know how far those regenerative capabilities go. We saw that a shotgun blast to the head at point blank range put him in a coma.
That's true. That's
So-
a really good point.
And that's because he suffered, we assume, some sort of brain trauma or something. And so it took time for that to heal. So he's not Superman level necessarily, you know, where you feel like Superman can pretty much walk through everything and hold his breath for 18 years and, you know, so it's, I would say, think of him more like, well, heck, since we've been talking about it this episode, think of him like a Buffy.
Okay.
She can get knocked around, she can get hurt, but she heals quick and she's very strong.
But she's not invincible. Like, she can still take damage, and to the point where you eventually become in danger if you take enough force of damage.
And I would say that is true for, you know, Luke Cage if he's fighting somebody strong enough. So in the comics, Cottonmouth, which is such a, when I just think that name, I mean, come on, guys. Like, but anyway, so in the comics, he's about as strong as Luke Cage. So you have to think that basically brings it down to two normal people having a fight are going to be able to do that level of damage to one another. So the fact that he has the unbreakable skin and that it shows him getting shot and stuff in the show, but keep in mind, when he first decides he's going to walk down that hallway with people shooting at him, he has that car door.
Oh, yeah.
Why would he
from the
take that
trailer.
car door unless he needs at least a little bit of extra protection or is worried about getting shot maybe in the head or in the eye or whatever?
Or he just doesn't want his clothes full of bullet holes.
Or he doesn't want a sweet hoodie full of bullet holes. I suppose
Yeah.
that's true. Or just because it looks cool.
It does. That's true.
He can be hurt, but yes, he is one of those characters that I believe becomes difficult to write. But again, Jessica Jones is the same way. In the comics, she can fly, sort of. She's terrible at it. And we get a little bit of that actually in Jessica Jones, where they hint at she might actually be able to fly, at least a little bit, and she's like, it's more like jumping really far,
Yeah.
So you have this like incredibly strong person who can kind of fly, and you're like, well, what's the danger to you if you're super strong? Well, we've seen where my wife and I were driving to the cabin, and she just had this idea the previous day at work or whatever she wanted to tell me about, and she's not a comic book fan at all, but she's like, I think I came up with a really good Superman story that would make a great movie or a great script or whatever. And it was, how do you defeat Superman? It's, well, you have to go mental and you have to go emotional.
Yes. Yeah.
And so...
Because physically, he's going to be fine.
And now look at the Netflix shows. What are we really seeing? Like, we do see Daredevil really take some serious damage, but in general, the things that all of these characters are dealing with are mental and emotional issues.
Psychological stuff, yeah, for sure. Which is one of the reasons that they turned out so good, because it becomes so much about the character and like the person behind the superpowers instead of just about the superpowers.
Right. So I'm looking forward to this show, and I'm also realizing that on some level, Luke Cage is not made for you, and it is not made for me.
Oh, yeah.
We are not really the audience, because the issues that it's dealing with, that it's set in Harlem, that they brought in popular artists to work on the soundtrack, because I think more than any other Marvel property, outside of maybe the whole Iron Man AC/DC thing, which they screwed up in Iron Man 3, is that this show is going to have a soundtrack. It's going to be a sound. They're very specifically picking some of these classic hip-hop, songs and stuff for this show. So it's going to feel more like a Suicide Squad, more like, I guess, Guardians of the Galaxy, because that had a very good soundtrack that I know did well. It's like the Suicide Squad soundtrack just went gold, actually.
Wow.
I guess I didn't include it in the things, but just when you put together that kind of music. So I look forward to that show. Like, I fully hope that I'm going to hear great things from other people about it, and maybe people that are more the real audience. That includes my listeners. Always want to hear as much as possible from people about what they're watching and what they think. And certainly this, because I'm excited for this. I am going to be potentially out of town, though. Like, this might be the weekend that I'm down in Iowa working at this haunted house, and especially if they get hit by this flood, I might be just there helping out, getting the place put back together. So I might not even get to it by that week's episode, or at least all of it.
Oh, man. Who am I going to talk to about it?
I know. But no, I am very, very much looking forward to it. I'm trying to look at my notes.
At your history notes and see if there's anything else. Okay, well, I did have like one other kind of big question, and this is more speculation on your part, just because you have a better feel for comics in general than I do. I wonder, what extent do you think that they're going to tie in like Claire and Iron Fist? I feel like Claire is probably going to be a big part of it, but do you think we're going to start getting hints of Iron Fist at all? Because he's the only one from this upcoming Defenders show that we know basically nothing about. I mean, unless you go look at the comics.
I think you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to drop some sort of hint in order to push forward with it. Just because we're not seeing a lot of tie-ins between Netflix and the greater MCU in the films. Otherwise, I would say look for something in Doctor Strange.
Oh, yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Since they're dealing with the supernatural, or deal with, or see something in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. if they're dealing with supernatural stuff. But I don't think we're going to get any crossover there, which is sad because I guess it's a very different tone between Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Netflix shows.
Yeah, I mean, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is network TV. It's that family-friendly. And Netflix is definitely that, like, hard R. There's, sex and gratuitous violence in there. And it fits with the tone they've established for these particular heroes. But once you start crossing over, if you put these Netflix heroes into a movie that felt like the Avengers or a show that felt like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it wouldn't feel right.
Right. And so I do, though. They're going to have to do something, even if it's small, I think we're definitely going to get something for Iron Fist. I have no idea what, because I don't know how they would tie in at all. Maybe there's going to be something.
Hopefully. It'll be cool because that's another one that I don't know that much of, but
Yeah.
I'm really invested in this little microcosm of the Netflix MCU that they have going on.
Right. And I mean, and it's so weird because kids know Iron Fist because the current Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon has Power Man and Iron Fist in the show.
Oh,
And
I didn't
he's
know
very much like this hippie kid, all will be well, kind of guy.
that.
So it's going to be interesting. So I have just just very weird little facts that I wrote down. First, there's sort of what Luke Cage is known for, if not the giant, yellow shirt, it's his catchphrase, "Sweet Christmas."
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my,
Sure.
yes. So "Sweet Christmas" is his catchphrase and has been for decades now. And apparently, and I learned this not in my own reading, but I actually learned this on the We Can Do This All Day podcast when they're talking about Luke Cage. Apparently that started out as "sweet sister" or "sweet whatever," was whatever he would say. But then at some point they hit "Sweet Christmas" and it just struck a chord, or they got a good reaction out of it. So yeah, and so he does say it in Jessica Jones. I believe it's when they're in bed together is he says "Sweet Christmas." But yes, because it's so weird and corny, but it's his version of "It's Clobberin' Time" or "Flame On" or, "Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man." Some of these...
Avengers Assemble.
Exactly. Yeah, his was always just "Sweet Christmas." Other fun facts is the actor Nicolas Cage is actually, his name is Coppola is his last name because he's the nephew of the director Francis Ford Coppola. And so his stage name, he took Cage from Luke Cage because Nick Cage is a huge comic book fan.
Oh, that's cool.
Just weird random thing. And then lastly, we were actually going to potentially get a Luke Cage film way back in like 2003. The film was in development, but nothing happened. And as I've said in the past with the Fantastic Four property, where Fox made this awful Fantastic Four movie just to hold on to the rights, the Luke Cage movie was never made, and so the rights reverted back to Marvel Studios in 2013. So that is why, potentially, I mean, I don't know why he would have been included in the Avengers or anything like that, but that's why there wasn't even a hint of anything of Luke Cage in the Marvel Cinematic Universe until that time. Because they didn't even,
That's really
they didn't have the
interesting.
rights to the character.
It's just a rights thing. Huh.
Yeah. So anything else that you need to know about Luke Cage before we move into the end of the show?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just excited. I'm really, really excited to see how it ties into the existing ones and what it hints at for the Defenders and for Iron Fist. So I feel like I learned a lot, though. I have a lot more context now, so thank you. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. And with that, we'll go... That's it for this week. Big thanks, obviously, to Void for coming over. And for the first time, it still seems ridiculous. That's only the first time you've been on the Comic Box.
I know. I'm sure I'll be back when we talk. I don't know. I'm always happy to talk MCU because I'm comfortable talking about it because I've seen it all. Or, I mean, the next time a very big, like, superhero video game comes out, like,
yes.
I play so many video games that I'll have context for you for that one. Maybe then it's Spider-Man that's kind of on the horizon. That one looks cool.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I always have links to geek2geekcast.net, and I believe I have links to the shows, but where can they find you personally?
Yes. So, like you said, all the Geek to Geekcast stuff. But for me, I blog almost daily at agreenmushroom.com. Or if you want to reach out, you can find me at grnmushroom, which is green mushroom without the E's, on Twitter. Twitter is usually the best place to get a hold of me.
Perfect. And then, as always, for this show, star ratings and reviews. I know it's one of those things that you don't like asking for a lot, and I still do, because we don't have... our listenership is growing, but it is not massive. So to help with that, any star rating or review on iTunes would be absolutely massively appreciated. Plus, it's a great way just to let me know what you think of the show. Otherwise,
Yeah, and like I always say, besides grabbing your friend's device and physically downloading an episode of this podcast on it, the best thing you can do besides that is to leave a star review, because it actually does spread shows so much more than like anything else you can do. It's crazy.
And then otherwise, if you want to talk to me, and do, because this isn't some lofty I don't talk to people because I have a show and I don't care what other people think. Like, I love talking to people on Twitter, and I do it as often as possible. So you can find me at Twitter. I have Rob's Comic Box, or at Rob's Comic Box on Twitter. It's a new Twitter I just started last week because all of the other ones that related to the comic box were taken. So it's Rob's Comic Box. Otherwise, I have a personal Twitter as well that is at Noby, which is at KNOWBY. And that is less comic booky, more all of the other nerd stuff I do, or just me in general. If I feel like making a stupid joke or ranting about something, it'll be on
you
there.
Looking like a hobbit.
Pictures of me looking like a hobbit. Yeah, I don't put that on the comic box because it's not comic box related. I don't know if that's a good move or not. Otherwise, you can email me at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, if you're listening to this on somebody else's device, but you prefer listening to your podcast on YouTube, we are now on YouTube. Tell them about YouTube.
YouTube is a video hosting site where you can watch videos.
Yes, and all of our...
I don't know. What do you want me to tell them about YouTube? All of our Geek to Geek Network
because it's not my channel.
So actually, I didn't set it up. Beej set it up so that I think all of the feeds for the Geek to Geek podcast network now are going to the Geek to Geek YouTube channel.
And I've done the same.
I don't know if they're organized into different lists yet, but you can definitely find them all. And we're going to do more with that in the future where we'll probably have playlists so you can see show by show, that type of thing. But they're all there in case you're at work and you have access to YouTube, but you don't have whatever your normal podcasting thing is, or if you just like listening on YouTube instead of on a device.
Right, and I have done that. I have there is a playlist with all of my episodes. I still have to figure out how to set it so that when I put new ones, you can do a command thing on the playlist where if it contains a certain word or something, it'll automatically load into that playlist. But we're both using the term episode, so I don't know how else I'm supposed to do that. So we're still figuring that out. But yes, as episodes are released, I'm putting them into a playlist, and I kind of want to do a video thing at some point. Like, even if it's just like the I'm going to call it an audio booth. It's not an audio booth. It's a little closet underneath the stairs. There is a light in here, but because of the blankets and things I hang up to deaden the sound, there's no light. And so it would look really, really weird for me to have a camera, but I want to try figuring that out. So I might try fiddling with my setup because I would love to just broadcast live to YouTube at the same time I record my show. And then it's a little cool additional thing where you get to hear, all of my mistakes and my verbal flubs and all of the things I edit out so that I sound like an amazing podcaster for the regular audio version, or just do like question and answer stuff. Oh, which is the last thing. As always, send me archive suggestions, send me your thoughts on Luke Cage and the Marvel Netflix series, but specifically, any questions. If you have something that you want to know about, that you want me to talk about on the show, if you have a question that you would like answered, Void and Beej just did this, and they have like 10 times the listeners that I normally have. But they had this really great sort of question and answer episode. And I don't expect to get enough questions to fill an episode, but I would love to take some viewer mail or stuff like that. Just the same as if you have your own podcast and it's about comics and you love comics and you want to come talk on the podcast with me about comics, do it. Shoot me a message because I just have fun talking to people. Right?
Right. I didn't know if you were trying to end it right there. No, so I was trying to be quiet so you could do a hard cut.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We'll leave that gap in there too, so people are like, "Oh man, my phone break." Poured too much champagne on it. Going, what?
See, I'm usually the one who's the editor, and I'm the one who drives the podcast with my show notes. So I don't know where you want to end it here. And now I'm living in this nebulous space.
Isn't it
where
great?
The thing that I'm saying right now may make it into the episode or may not, but I'm not the editor, so I don't know. And it's kind of terrifying.
I'm not cutting a thing. I know
you're not. Because if I were editing this, I would leave this part in too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll call that good then. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before I do my outro? Are you sure you don't want to even just try one of them?
Oh, no. Maybe next time. Maybe you can convince me next time. I'll be back for sure.
Get like a xylophone or Have your kids get a kazoo, join in, we'll turn it into a band.
Yeah, maybe next time.
All right, so for now then, we will close the comic box. Again, big thanks to Void for joining me. I look forward to the next time he's on the show, and always the next time I am on their show, because every week I'm listening, and not the Final Fantasy stuff, to be fair. That's totally outside my purview. But yeah, anytime anything about a superhero comes up or anything about film comes up, I'm like, oh, maybe, but give her. And I keep threatening them with one of these days I'm going to invade the channel that they use when they record, when they're talking to each other online, that I'm just going to invade and take over one of their podcasts. But I haven't yet.
We've been talking about it. We might end up doing some kind of crossover episode when we get to the next MCU movie. So when Doctor Strange comes out in November, you might hear Beej and I on this channel and Rob on our channel, just so we can talk about it a bunch.
Because we've all swapped around, but we have never actually done an episode with all three of us.
No, not yet.
So that's going to happen. Yeah. All right. So we are closing the comic box for this week. We will see you guys next time. Ba-da-ba-ba-doo-down, twow, ba-da-da-ba-da-ba-doo-down, down, digga-da-down, ba-da-da-ba-da, comic barrel, stabba-da-ba-ba-ba, Geek to Geek Network had the Void on the show. Dibba-dibba-dip-doop-doom, down, digga-da-down, wow.
Awesome.
And then I usually say something dumb at the end, some little note. You got anything?
I got nothing. Sweet Christmas.
Perfect.